Welcome to the Psychic Kitchen podcast. Today we have Dr. Haley Young of HealThrough.love. It is scrolling on the bottom of the screen. How's everyone doing today?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, brother. Haley, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about you, how you got here, what you're doing, etc.
Yeah, so I originally went to school, and I guess what would seem as a bit more of a traditional science background. I always knew I wanted to go the natural or alternative route, but through a more traditional means of doing so. And I ended up completing my PhD in natural medicine. But somewhere along the lines of learning about natural alternative modalities, what really called to me was energy-based medicine. And it started mostly with more traditional forms of energy-based medicine, like pulse electromagnetic frequency, biofeedback, neurofeedback, things that are very recognized in the field of what I'll call traditional alternative medicine. But then as I was working with people, I started to notice that I would sometimes just get messages for them, just things to share with them that would just resonate with them in such a deep way. It might bring them to tears, or I might know things about them. I might be able to help them like dissect their own consciousness. And it was around the time that that started happening that I started to get this sense that there was this whole other world of healing and growth that can't really be measured by anything physical or tangible, which is when I kind of, I guess I would say I kind of evolved in more to this like spiritual way of viewing things or spiritual healing. And now that's what most of what I do and what my practice is based around. Like I really would describe myself as somebody who helps people with integrating more of their soul and expanding who they are. And a lot of times do that through locating belief systems, like connecting with people, finding out what limitations they might have in their unconscious, and supporting people in breaking through whatever limitations might be present that might be limiting the expansion of their soul. So that's kind of like the quick synopsis of it that I could give.
Yeah, excellent. Sounds great. And so I know when I messaged you and asked you about a date to come on, you were quite keen to come on this date. So you have an affinity with Halloween, do you?
Yeah, so I do. I love Halloween. So I think it's just like a really fun day where I think from even like a non-spiritual perspective that, you know, it's a day where people get to just dress up and play and have fun, which I love that. But then this other aspect of it too is I really enjoy the non-physical world. Like I really enjoy exploring the non-physical world. And I actually have, you know, dabbled in spell work and magic, and this idea, like from my belief, like we are truly unlimited. Anything's possible. We're capable of creating anything, manifesting anything, healing anything. And I think one of the tools that people have done that with for thousands and thousands of years has been what we might consider witchcraft, or, you know, the power of harnessing your own consciousness, harnessing other elements around you to then create what you want to create. So I've always loved Halloween because of what it represents and because of the sacredness of the day around using magic to create your reality.
So we talked earlier about like entities and demons, archons, etc. Like, what's your viewpoint on this?
So my view is very different than most people, and I will say that my view has recently shifted. This wasn't always my view. Actually, when I first got into the realm of spirituality, I had this moment where I literally woke up one day and began, for anyone who's familiar with light language, which freaked me out. It was like, because I didn't know what it was. I just had this desire. I had heard of light language before, but it's like all of a sudden to wake up one day and to just have this desire to start moving in a specific way and making specific sounds without really knowing what I was doing. It was very weird. I thought I was going through a psychotic break at first, but luckily I found a lot of people who were going through something similar, people who were speaking languages that sounded almost the same to the ones that started coming through for me. And rather than fighting it, I kind of dove into it. And that's when I started my first exposure to entities came, not necessarily negative entities or dark entities, but just other beings in general. And I started connecting with them, and it was like a really powerful and empowering experience for me. I absolutely loved it. And it was definitely a huge catalyst for change in my life. But then I started to see from at that time in my life what felt like the dark side of that, and I began hearing about people who were being attacked spiritually, and I began experiencing that myself, where I felt like I was having attacks, and my energy was all over the place, and then I couldn't keep it clean or clear, and I was having all these issues with dark entities the more I worked with what I would perceive as light entities. And then, I kind of shifted my focus. I was still doing that, but then I was being called to like different ways of working with energy and so forth. And somewhere along the line, my belief system around entities really, really changed. And this probably won't agree with most people, but I no longer believe in dark and light entities as far as like there's good and there's bad ones. Sure, there may be ones who have intentions that are aligned with me versus intentions that aren't aligned with me. And that's how I relate to them. But I had this experience where I actually ended up in the hospital and nearly died. I literally went to bed perfectly fine and then woke up in the middle of the night, shaking uncontrollably, like freezing cold. And I actually got flesh-eating bacteria in my blood, went into septic shock in the matter of 4 hours, was in the hospital. And they told me, they're like, if your boyfriend hadn't brought you, you would have probably died within 12 hours because of how aggressive it was. Luckily, I was okay. And I remember a friend of mine at that time said to me, "Oh my God, it's an attack. Something attacked you. Something was, trying to, snuff out your light, because of all the work you're doing in the world." And it was in that moment that something in me shifted, because before I had this conversation with that person, I had already gone through in my head, how is this situation serving me? What is it doing for me? And I had found that I had felt like I had improved so much of myself. And then I had this catastrophic experience, and I got to see how I responded to stress, to like severe stress. And I didn't respond in a way that I want to respond based on who I want to be in the world. And so I had already, as I was sitting in this hospital bed, hooked up to all these things, I had already, over the course of several days, gotten through the thick of the worst of it, and also come out of it with this like, wow, this experience has really shown me a lot about who I am and a lot about who I don't want to be anymore. And I was actually grateful for the experience. And then this person came in and they're like, it was an attack, they're trying to snuff out your light. And all of a sudden I just got this download, this instant realization. And I think I wasn't ready for this. And maybe not everyone will be ready for this, which is that nothing can ever hurt you unless you are in a state of victim. And so if something was attacking me, let's just put that out there, something wanted to hurt me, I've now taken that power away from them by flipping it into, how does this serving me? And now I'm grateful for the experience. Like, imagine if you wanted to hurt someone and you do something to them, and then like they turn around and then they're like, oh, thank you so much for doing that for me. It helped me so much. You'd be like, to diffuse that aggression. If you live by this idea, nothing can hurt me, everything's always serving me. If you live by that, nothing can attack you. And since then, I haven't had a single what people might perceive as energy attack.
Since Halloween, we're gonna kind of go with it. Of course, we'll have differing views. It's fine. That's not a big deal to any of us. how do you explain like possession and stuff like that? Like I've seen clients, I got to be careful. It's client confidentiality. We're on camera, but I've seen people like physically moved. I've seen like objects physically move. Like what's your take on that?
So, well, yeah, well, separate from possession, I definitely
Yeah.
believe telekinesis is possible. I actually used to practice telekinesis, which I think we're all capable of moving things with our consciousness. I practiced it for a while and got really good at it, and then I kind of let it go for a bit. But I do think that, so seeing objects move, 100%, yes, definitely possible, maybe even normal for a lot of people. But as far as possession goes, I believe, so comes down to more belief systems. Once again, my fundamental belief system is that our reality is a projection of our belief systems. That is my fundamental belief. Whatever you believe about your reality will be true. And so I believe for people who are existing in a reality or a consciousness where they believe that dark entities can hurt them, then 100% they can be susceptible to that because it's their reality to create that. Everybody's reality is individual and can be created however they want to create it. So if somebody is at the consciousness or the belief system that there are entities and they can hurt me, because I've been there, I had that belief, and then entities attack me all the time, 100% attacks, possession, things like that can come in when you're in that state of consciousness. But if somebody fully like, and I've seen this in my life at least, when I no longer believe that entities could hurt me, that everything is happening to serve me, then once again, my reality no longer allowed those kind of experiences to come in because my core belief changed. So yes, there can be a perceived experience of negative entity attacks, but it has to be in congruence with somebody who has a belief system that allows that to happen. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on.
I find it interesting because it's, even if you were to look from an entity perspective, sometimes these entities are there to teach people lessons, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Sometimes they are there. It has to be a judgment call sometimes when I'm working on people for that kind of stuff. But if I just want to get rid of it, it just depends like how much it's affecting their life. But at the same time, it is Halloween and all that. So like, what's your views like on? Because I'm genuinely interested, like curses, hexes, stuff like that. I'm of the belief system that I can't be touched. So that's always been me. I've seen stuff since I've been a little kid. But once I had a situation where I almost got possessed, and that was over with when I was 37. Then a couple years later, I got into Mayan shamanism, and that was from like this 36,000 year lineage, and they taught some pretty intense stuff. But yeah, it's I don't know, because there's so many different viewpoints on these things, you know. But like even with curses and hexes, like I've had thousands of like curses and hexes thrown at me, and they don't affect me. But I see, like when I worked in the witch shop in Savannah, I see these people come in and do all this like love magic and all this stuff. But I'm like, I remember telling the owner of the place, I was like, half of these people shouldn't even be touching this stuff. Like they don't know what the F they're doing with this.
Yeah.
And I can kind of relate, although I didn't have to go through having flesh-eating bacteria, I must admit, to realize that was pretty extreme. But I suppose you could argue that how much someone is affected depends on how much they need to, how much they're not aware, and then they need to be aware. So the more drastic the effect, the more drastic they need to sort of realize, because you often see, and we've had quite a few on this podcast say that they kind of finally woke up, so to speak, when they were sort of right near the end and they felt like ending it all, and that was because they had to get to that stage because they weren't seeing it previously, and so it had to they had to get to that sort of drastic situation in order to see reality or see what they needed to see or needed to realize. But I know what you mean. A few years ago, I was doing a gig and we were in this pub and we were playing away, and all of a sudden all the energy just drained out of my body. And I felt really weak, carried on playing and managed to finish the gig. But everyone's saying, "Oh, you look awful," you know, and I was really, really white, even whiter than normal. And that was, I know, I always remember it because I thought that I needed protection. And so that was when I believed that I could be attacked. But after, you know, a few months after that, I kind of started sort of encouraging the belief in myself that I didn't need any protection because there was no fear. It's like to have no fear because there was nothing that I needed to be afraid of, because and ever since then I've been fine. I haven't, that incident hasn't happened again. I haven't felt like drained or attacked or anything like that. And so I do agree with you, Haley, that it is about having that sort of core belief that you can't be attacked. Although I think there may be an element of subconscious, because obviously Mark Thomas and we've spoken about the subconscious and how do we really know what's in our subconscious. So even though in our conscious mind we may believe that we are sort of impenetrable, so to speak, but if our subconscious is saying something different than the we're not aware of, then maybe that also has something to do with it, if that makes sense.
One thing I've noticed is I remember like when I first kind of woke up to a whole nother level of this. I know things will be different for everyone. It's fine. So like I remember when I took boundaries from my former teacher the first time. And this wasn't like she was removing like archons and energetic parasites and all these things. People were like freaking out. But after that first time I took it, because I took this class like 7 times, I remember walking into my ex-girlfriend's bathroom, and I've always seen angels and ghosts and other stuff. This was I've been a kid, anyways, and I saw like all these black figures like running across the wall. I'm gonna get to my point here, but I was like, I remember going back to her and being like, "There's fucking demons all over this fucking bathroom. Like, what the fuck is this?" Like, I'm just looking at it like I don't even know what to make of this. And it didn't like scare me. I was just like, whatever, it's crazy. And she's like, "Oh, you can see them now." But here's the question, is that I've seen this with actually 2 of my exes, especially when I was like 39. I'm 46 now. So, and I don't know if they actually affected them, because they were, I mean, even the other one, they were like I tuned into her room because like by location, moving into another space or realm or whatever. I would see them, but I'm like, are they being affected? Do they know they're being affected? Or is it just normal to them? Do you get where I'm going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's kind of a couple questions I feel like I need to catch up in answering. But I'll start with that one, which is kind of, it will answer your other question about spells and hexes a little bit too, I think. Because once again, I'm not the knower of all things. I always like to preface this, like you guys everyone can just take what I say with a big grain of salt. But this is just,
everyone's gonna have their own viewpoint, so
and based on my belief, technically we're all correct. So whatever you believe is true for you. So like, yeah, 100%, no one's wrong there. But my thing is, like, you mentioned this too, Jimmy, is about the subconscious. So when I initially began having experiences with like darker entities, it wasn't like I was like consciously holding a belief like dark entities want to attack me. I started having the perceived attacks first. Then that belief system developed, which made it worse. So what caused the initial attack? My belief is that there was a big part of me that was still living in the victim mindset, and the entities were actually just a method of helping me work through that. Kind of like what Jimmy said, or you said it too, Thomas, is that sometimes entities come to teach us things. There's parts of me that still didn't feel powerful. And I think this really illuminated when I began channeling light language. There was a part of me that unlocked a subconscious limitation of, oh, I need to connect with other beings and entities because they're more powerful than me. And so when I began channeling, I feel like that unconscious belief began to surface that I'm not as powerful as other beings. And then the entities came to teach me and to show me that victim mindset, that lack of power. And so I had to go through that period of my life where I was getting all these perceived attacks after attacks after attacks. But eventually it led me to that realization, oh no, I don't need anything outside of myself, and I'm never going to be a victim. Attack's gone. So, but I believe the initial part of it was there was a subconscious limitation, and that was how it played out in my reality. It played out for me as entity attack experiences.
So the subconscious was creating the reality for you to see what was in there, basically.
Yeah, it was helping me. And I ask my soul a lot for support. I'm constantly asking it to remove limitations. So it's like, all right, let's do this. Buckle up. Like next test, next lesson. And that was just one of them. But once I graduated, I don't love that word, but for lack of better words, that lesson, I stopped having those experiences. And then on to other lessons that are showing up in other ways for me.
That's cool. So I noticed, like with this time of year, do you connect? Do you relate to the sort of the witch kind of energy? So I noticed that there was a couple of things that you posted earlier, or yesterday, or the day before, when you were doing your thing with a witch's hat on and get up and stuff. Is the witch thing, is that close to your heart, shall we say?
I love the idea of witches. Like for me, I love that idea of connecting with your magic. And I think there's a many different ways you can go about this. It doesn't have to just be through witchcraft, but I think that's one way that people connect with their power within. And so for me, if my belief is if witchcraft is something that helps you feel empowered, then it's a very, very powerful tool. Whereas if it's something that becomes disempowering, and you like, once again, like you're constantly fighting off attacks and all your spells about fighting them, then it's maybe lost the whole point of it, which the whole point of it is about connecting your power to create whatever it is you want to create. So I love the witches, like anything witch related. I've done spells in the past as well. And I found it to be very helpful in a lot of ways. One of my first interactions with what some people, not everybody, depends on your belief, might consider a dark entity, was actually a very powerful experience. So much so that I actually have a tattoo right here that represents Glyph, which is Lilith. For anyone who knows who Lilith is, she's often referred to as the mother of demons, which my first experience with her was a little bit fearful, like, oh my gosh, this is bad, this is wrong, this isn't someone I should be interacting with. But it actually ended up being very empowering experience for me. And that's also what part of, I think, the reason my belief around entities shifted is I began interacting and seeing what people might perceive as demons and angels in different lights. I've now come to learn this. Once again, it's my belief is that demons give you what you want, angels give you what you need. And so for people demon magic, often you'll find that you get what you want, like maybe more money or more of this, but then you have to learn the lesson through realizing that what you wanted maybe wasn't actually what was best for you, and you're not actually where you thought you were going to be. And you learn the lesson that way versus angel magic is more like, okay, we're going to give you what you need. It might not be what you want. We might burn your life to the ground, but when it rebuilds, it's going to be better than you could have ever thought about. And so I find that angels are like a bit more of like an accelerated path that can sometimes seem harder, but in the end have more reward. Whereas the other one, it's kind of like a different way. So once again, like my mind, I began to not villainize either of them and make either of them good or either of them bad. They're just a different way to learn a lesson from my belief. And you just have to choose how do you want to learn your lesson. So.
Yeah. And I remember a while ago, I did a little bit of sort of digging on the, I don't know if you've heard of it, the Ars Goetia, I think it's called, as King Solomon, and he did loads of sigils to summon demons and stuff like that. And they said basically that they'll give you what you want, but you have to there's a price to pay for that, or something like that. Whereas, like say, the angels, that kind of different other side, they give you what you need rather than sort of your carnal or your flesh desires sort of thing, which is what the demons do, or so-called demons or whatever they are. But Michelle says, you got a question? Are you speaking as a person who feels? Well, I'll put it on the screen. Or literally sees, she says.
So I think, is she asking like, am I clairvoyant versus clairsentient? Am I interpreting that correctly? Do you think?
Yeah, are you feeling it? Well, there's a lot of people that are very clairvoyant, obviously. A lot of people are clairsentient. They feel. There's people that are claircognizant. They know. Like one of my strongest gifts is claircognizance. Then I'm clairvoyant or sentient, but I just know what I need to do. Does that make sense? So I think that's what she's going to.
Yeah, I would say if I had to rank them, it would be clairsentience, then clairognisant. Clairvoyant would probably be last. I'd probably be clairaudient before clairvoyant. So I don't. For me, like seeing has never. I have had visions before, but that's not how information usually comes to me. It's usually more of a feeling and a knowing, I would say, for myself.
She says, in regards to negative entities.
Oh, into negative entities. So those ones I've had many different experiences. Usually though, it's always like unless I'm in a meditative state, the clairvoyant doesn't activate for me. So if my eyes are open, it's always a feeling and a knowing when I'm interacting with any type of energy, or if like an energy moves into my space that doesn't really feel aligned with me. It's usually always first a feeling and then a knowing.
And are you speaking of this dimension or other dimensions? She says.
It depends what part of the conversation she said that at. I'm not sure.
I do mean about the negative entities, like in that kind of context, if that makes sense.
Well, I think a lot of entities in general, like they exist in multiple planes of existence, so that's hard to answer. But I will say that reminds me, I didn't answer your one question about spells and curses. This one, I feel like maybe people will align with this, but maybe not. The way I kind of see reality is like almost like sheets of fabric, and there's like layers to reality, and each layer has different things you can participate in. And your beliefs decide what layers you're participating in. And so it's kind of like what you said, Thomas, like you don't believe like anything can hurt you, spells, curses, they can't affect you. And so there's a plane of reality that exists where they could affect you, but your beliefs aren't matching that plane of reality. You're existing here, let's say, in this plane. So everything that comes at you, it's going to have no effect. Whereas if your beliefs or your subconscious aligned with the reality where curses and spells could have effect on you, then you'd be choosing to participate in that layer of reality. So do they exist? Can they affect people? 100% yes. But that's only if you're existing in the plane of reality that aligns with that. You can shift your beliefs and shift your consciousness and state so that that plane of reality is just not one you're participating in. So
I'm going to go on a totally different wild tangent here. Because lately I'm getting the message to call out some people in the spiritual community. I'm finding this one fun. What are your thoughts on people like Bashar and other people of this nature?
My thing is, once again, everything is a tool for expansion. So there's a lot of videos and information that Bashar shares that I absolutely love. And I think is a beautiful tool that can expand people. There's some things that he shared that just doesn't align and doesn't resonate with my reality. But once again, I'm not going to, my big belief is nothing's all black, all white. Like everything's in the gray space. And so I always live my life as what is calling to me right now. I go to that, I get the information I need. And then often I feel like I'm no longer excited about it. Like there was a period in my life where I was really excited about Bashar, watched a bunch of his videos for like 2 weeks. And then I was like, yeah. And I just moved on because I realized I'd gotten the information I needed that he could provide. And now that tool was no longer beneficial to me. And I think that's important for everybody, is to trust what you're being called to And the moment you feel that discoherence, then just know that probably means you got what you needed, and disconnect and find another teacher.
Yeah, it's good advice. Yeah, exactly. Is there anyone you follow at the moment, or
So right now, not particularly, no, but one I would say that, even though I'm not really watching a lot of his stuff right now, but one that I would say that I always go back to, and some people have not, he's not for everybody, is Dr. Joe Dispenza. There's just something about the way he shares the science behind our capacity to create miracles. I will always have a very, very deep appreciation for that man, because of how he's bringing mysticism and magic to the skeptic, the person who maybe otherwise wouldn't be open to hearing it. So I always, like, whenever somebody's kind of just dabbling or entering into the world of, can I create miracles? Can I heal an uncurable illness? Can I do this? My first person I always direct them to is him, because I feel like having the science connected to the spirituality is a very, very unique thing. So I do love him. But otherwise, all my other teachers, they kind of come and go.
Yeah, one I really resonate with, I don't know if you've heard of him, but Chiron.
No, I haven't actually.
It's KY. I'll send you a video. He's been around forever. He doesn't like to get, like, he's on YouTube. He's massive, but he doesn't do much like other social media platforms. I've listened to hundreds of hours of this guy. I just trust what I feel. And that was kind of in, like, when I first got into metaphysics when I was 34 or something. But yeah, it's I think it's important for, and I mean, other teachers will teach lessons. So, like, one thing I've noticed with subconscious reconditioning, especially with TikTok and some other people, is that a lot of them are forming cults by using, like, subconscious techniques, because I know subconscious techniques. And I'm watching them and I'm like, you guys are literally brainwashing people into believing that you are like the Messiah or this or this. And I was seeing this on Facebook. I remember there was a guy, I can't say his name, but the FBI arrested him for forming a cult back when I first started when I was like 39. I don't remember his name though. But yeah, it's what are your thoughts on that? Because I see a lot of people just getting really brainwashed.
Once again, I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record, but
Yeah.
I think, once again, that is a level of reality that you can choose to participate in. Where, like, for me, I think a lot of, like, these culty people, like, I feel very neutral towards them, because I'm like, oh, wow, they have great information. I take the information that serves me and then I move on. But I do believe, depending on where you are in your consciousness state, there are what I would call traps you can fall into. And I think that these traps are all over the place. I've fallen into a million traps in my spiritual journey, manifestation traps, law of attraction traps, like, just different ways that, you know, it can be very, very challenging. And I think this is one of the hardest parts about when you're first learning to use your discernment, is I call it spiritually rebranding a toxic pattern. And I got this term because of my own experiences, because that's what I used to do. So an example, I used to be a very controlling person, where a way that I managed my anxiety was trying to, like, plan my entire day, make sure everything happened perfect, making sure I was in control of everything, in control of the people, the environment, all of that stuff. And I always had to be predicting the future and controlling everything in my external world to try to feel safe. And then I heard of law of attraction, and it resonated with me because it was true to my soul. But my ego took it and did what I call a spiritual rebrand of being controlling, where I went from, instead of trying to control my external reality, I went into trying to control my external reality through controlling my internal reality. That, like, if I can change everything inside and fix all the broken parts of me, then my reality will reflect what I want it to reflect. But really what I was doing was just doing the exact same thing, but just instead of control my external reality physically, controlling my internal world to control my external world. And it was like the right thing done in the wrong way. So it didn't really yield any results because it was still coming from that foundation of me trying to control rather than me just giving myself space to be. And I think this can happen with any spiritual teacher. What happens is when there are spiritual teachers sharing information that is very true and resonant to the frequencies of our soul, the frequency of love, it's very easy for us to immediately resonate with it. But then we have to be careful that the ego doesn't run with it in a way where we can become dangerously attached to ideas to the point where we become inflexible. We're not willing to hear other information. We can then take the ideas that we've learned and create an ego projection of it that isn't really aligned with the soul, kind of like the one I described. And so those, what I would say, are the biggest traps, is where you're taking something that resonates with your soul, and then the ego's translating it in a way where it's creating a pattern that really isn't truly resonant with who you are. And I feel like that's probably the biggest thing I've seen people fall into with spiritual teachers, is they're getting information that maybe they're not ready for, or they're maybe not able to perceive in a way that's actually actionable for them.
Brilliant. The categories. How do you view manifesting, by the way, now that you've said that?
I have been on a roller coaster of my belief around manifesting. I've gone through periods, like I told you, like, I'm the creator of my reality, I'm in power, I'm in control, I can create everything I want, and like, but kind of like the energy underneath it was still very controlling. So I wasn't getting what I wanted, to then being like, I'm just going to want nothing, because like wanting things is just suffering. And I kind of went to that extreme. And now I'm in a place of manifesting, but from a very different perspective. It's kind of like what we talked about with demon magic versus angel magic. Before, my perspectives of manifesting were, manifesting is about getting everything you want in the exact way you want it, kind of like what people use demon magic for. Whereas now manifesting for me is about creating a reality that's in deeper alignment with my soul, and letting go of the expectation and the attachment to how it needs to look and when it needs to show up. And so for me, manifesting is no longer, I want this massive house, or, I want to look this way, or I want this to happen. Instead, for me, manifesting is about supporting myself and going deeper into the flow of who I am and into the flow of the universe, because I know that's where the blessings reside. I don't know what those blessings are. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know it's probably going to be better than anything I couldn't imagine anyways. And so my manifesting process is a lot more like surrender. And it looks like living from the belief, if I don't have it, I don't need it. And I apply this to my entire life, even if it comes to motivation. Like, if I'm not motivated to clean my house, then I must just mean it's not in flow for me to clean my house today. And almost always when I honor that, a day or two later, I get like this burst of energy and I'm excited about cleaning my house. And I've started to live in that thing. If I don't have it, I don't need it. And what I'm starting to notice is when I'm not in the state of constantly trying to push things, things just start showing up. And so that's now been my process of manifestation. It's actually been about doing less and just existing more and doing what feels right for me. And my life gets more magical that way. But once upon a time, manifesting was a lot of pushing for me and a lot of trying really hard. Now manifesting is just like the byproduct of just enjoying your life. So
one thing I noticed with manifesting, I just say what I want. I mean, I'll look at people like Tony Robbins. I'll look at people like Joseph Murphy, Neville Goddard. I research like a crazy person, because if someone knows something I don't know, I want to know what it is. But I just write it, say it out loud sometimes. I mean, there's been a lot of ex-girlfriends I've had over the years where literally I've sat in my car at 2 a.m., probably on edibles or something. And I'm like, I want this, 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 this. And it'll come in the way I want it. But then something happens and my guides are like, you did not quite explain what that meant when you said that. Like, one of them, I was like, I don't want crazy. And they were like, you didn't define what crazy meant.
Yeah. And you're not, that's the one challenge I found too, like, is if you're trying to like really like consciously create your reality. You got to be so specific. Whereas if you just surrender to the universe and you just say the universe, like my belief is like the universe already knows. The universe already knows what's going to light up your soul. Your soul already knows what's going to feel good. And so if you're willing to let go of all those details and just focus on the feeling, ooh, I want a reality that feels more like this, let the universe fill in the details. And then you're going to less likely be in a situation where you get what you asked for, but then realize it's not what you wanted. Once again, it's a lot like the demon versus angel experience, which I don't think either of them are good or bad. It's just a different experience in how you want to create your reality, which
One
for
thing
me,
I find really interesting is like, one thing I heard, it's like people say, what would Jesus do? But I've heard this manifestation from a different subtext, is that people will be like, okay, pattern yourself after what somebody else would do, like that you look up to. Like pattern your life kind of off of that, and then you'll start attracting not them, but you'll start attracting, like if you're saying, okay, I want to be, let's just use Tony Robbins example. I want to act like Tony Robbins would act with everything in my life. Well, you'll start to see, because you're like moving more into that frequency is what I'm hearing. And then your reality will start shifting. But it's like Tony Robbins in one reality is a security guard, and this reality is this Tony Robbins. So it's like he decided to make this shift. I don't think people realize that. Like one tiny thing can shift everything. They have to be willing to make that shift.
yeah, I actually love that. And I think that's been a huge practice for me. I think you're right on par with that, is showing up as the person who is already living in the reality that you desire, which for me, it's once again not about the physical reality, but what you said. If I want to be in this reality where I feel good and I feel abundant and everything feels in flow with me, then who am I when I'm existing in that state? Oh, I'm happy. I'm bubbly. Oh, I take care of my body. I eat healthy. You don't do those things that version of me would do, because I wouldn't be, eating pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a tub of ice cream right after for all my meals, in a reality where I'm happy. I'd probably feel like crap. So, it's like working out those details of, okay, if I'm living in that state and I'm embodying that energy, how do I show up? And I always say, this has really helped me. There's kind of like 3 levels to existence. There's your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And we can't always have all 3 of those aligned at the same time. That can be hard. That's why I say take the pressure off yourself and try to have 2 out of 3 of those aligned. So let's just say you're feeling really like in a bad mood and you start to have like really negative thoughts. It might not be easy to change your emotions in that moment, but you can immediately choose to show up differently, and you can choose to consciously think differently. Eventually the emotion will catch up. And so I always say, like, think about what are the thoughts, emotions, and actions that version of me wants to take on a daily basis, and do your best to make sure 2 out of 3 of those things are always in alignment. And even if one has fallen behind, that's okay. Like, we're human beings. The less pressure we put on ourselves, the better it is. I find the more you just practice unconditional self-love, then it really doesn't matter. You can have a bad day and still be in perfect alignment with your desires, because you're choosing to love yourself on that bad day rather than judge yourself. So I always say that, like, love trumps everything. Be grumpy and love yourself through it. And technically the self-love will override the grumpy vibration. So, it just exists.
I mean, even grumpy people can be loved. I mean, look at Oscar the Grouch. I mean, everyone loves him. So, but you might be happy for 5, 10, 15 minutes after you've eaten the pizza and ice cream, but in the long run, probably not. But I saw something fascinating the other day, and I haven't actually gone any deeper on it yet. But I saw something the other day that said that the reason why people tend to like pizza is because apparently grains, or I think it was gluten, has a certain kind of protein or something in it that mixes with something that in the dairy either it's protein or whatever, and the two of them together make morphine or something like that, and that's why people get such a high or whatever from eating something like pizza, because that's obviously got both. And I found that quite fascinating, though I haven't sort of gone into it yet, but I thought it was interesting to check if it's true. But when would you say do you feel like you're at your happiest now that you're in that sort of flow and not putting any expectations on anything and not trying to control everything? Would you say, like, the state that you're in at the moment, you're sort of the happiest you've been?
I definitely say I'm the happiest I've ever been. Like, my life only gets better and better and better. Though, mind you, it's like this. It's not like in a perfect lineup like I think all of ours is, but I would say I'm more in a state of unconditional love and acceptance than I am in a state of happiness. I'm a very sensitive person, and my emotions are like, they change constantly throughout the day. And I have moments where I'm happy and I'm laughing my ass off, and then all of a sudden I'm crying. And I now, rather than trying to always feel happy all the time, like, I would say I'm really happy maybe 50 to 60% of the time. But I would say 90% of the time I've mastered the art of loving myself and accepting myself. And because of that, emotions don't stay long. When I'm in an uncomfortable emotion, like, it moves very, very quickly, because I'm always like, okay, why is it here? What is it here to show me, if I'm ready for that? Or sometimes I just say, ugh, I just want to be in this emotion, and I'm just going to let myself, because that's okay. I can still be in this emotion and I'm still worthy of love and acceptance. And I find that by giving myself that space, it just moves very, very quickly. And so I've redefined what constitutes me being evolved as a person, because I used to think that it needed to be happy. I needed to be happy all the time. I needed to feel good all the time. And when I fell into the law of attraction trap, it was like every time I had a negative emotion, I'm like, I'm out of alignment with my desires. I'm tracking all the bad things in the world. And it was my belief that actually made that happen. Whereas now my belief is I can feel any way I want to feel, but because my core belief is that I'm always in alignment with my desires, I can have a bad day and still be in alignment. I can still have that alignment with me. And so I've just realized that I think one of the traps of law of attraction is falling into this idea of putting pressure on yourself to always be happy and judging yourself when you aren't, which actually further puts you in the wrong direction of being in alignment with who you are. Because who you are is unconditional love, which means that you should be able to feel sad if you're sad, and you should be able to just love yourself through that. That's alignment. And so I think that's the key thing with law of attraction that I think isn't explained well, is that the key to being in the vibration of attracting things that will most likely feel good to you is about being in the deepest alignment with who you are. And yes, who you are probably often feels good, but who you are when you don't feel good would never judge you. So if you feel upset and you judge yourself, you've moved farther away from the alignment. Whereas if you feel upset and you love yourself, you're going closer to alignment, and therefore you can still be vibrationally aligned with your desires. So I would say, rather than being the happiest I've ever been, I would say I'm the most loving I've ever been. I would use that word.
One thing I want to jump on, you have this machine. I've seen you post about it.
Yeah.
And I saw like there was entity, there's other things. I don't know enough about it. So I'm asking you, what is this? What does it do?
So I work with remote biofeedback, which is essentially a type of biofeedback, but it can connect with you no matter where you are in the world. I put in what I call your quantum phone number, which is your full name at birth, your birthday, your birth location. And then I can also include a picture of you as well, but it's not required, because that's the time that your soul moved into this time space reality. It moved in on that day and that location under that name. And therefore that's almost like a phone number where the device can call you into the quantum field. I want to connect with the soul born on this day under this name and this location. And then by that person wanting to be there, it can connect with them. And what it can do is I can see people's chakras, their auras. I can see every emotion they're feeling, every emotion that's having an impact on their energy, every emotion they're repressing. I can see the ages they're holding repressed traumas in their bodies. It really has, like, there's way too much to even explain. And then the device can help do corrections. but I've used this in many different ways. I've used this mostly one-on-one, but I've used it in group settings. And then I've also, it has this really, this is probably the video you saw, it has this really interesting function where it can detect temporal anomalies. So if I go and I load a person into my device, if there's a temporal anomaly that day, it'll bring a pop-up and let me know. And that's really good to know because temporal anomalies essentially are rips in the space-time continuum. And so the way I like to explain reality is that timelines are like strings, and all these strings run parallel to one another. And when you go like 1 or 2 strings over, not a lot is going to change in your timeline. It's going to be almost identical, maybe like a little bit different. The farther you get in strings, the greater the changes in that alternate timeline. And all of these timelines exist all at once. And so for people who are doing quantum jumping or timeline shifting, they're essentially trying to shift their vibration from this string to match the string, let's say that's all the way over here. And so then that way they can align with the reality that has this. On the days we have temporal anomalies, the way I explain it is it's almost like somebody takes a pair of scissors and cuts all the strings. And so as the strings are waving, rather than it going like this and they're kind of parallel, they start to overlap and intersect until eventually they refuse. How do they refuse? They refuse based on the consciousness you're holding that day. And so on these days, they're days that you can potentially create greater miracles or greater leaps within your consciousness evolution if you use those days to do that. You know, because like if normally you're here and you're kind of like all the strings are like this, all of a sudden you're like 8 strings over, 8 timelines over, and you can refuse over here very, very easily compared to on a different day. That's kind of like the way I would explain it from the information I've gotten intuitively, as well as the information I've gotten from the device.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Where do you get this device from? Did you make it yourself?
Oh, no, it's called the Skio. It's from the Skio Adductor line, which is a line of biofeedback devices. So if anyone wanted to look it up, I think the website's skio-adductor.com. They cost a pretty penny. They're an investment, but if you're ever looking to practice biofeedback with your clients, it's a good investment. This device was definitely one of the greatest catalysts of change. This and my Scalar device are probably the 2 greatest catalysts of change for me. When I got them, I went through a very quick evolution afterwards.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Jimmy, sorry, let me jump in.
Yeah.
There was this lady I lived with that was fucking insane, but she had mental issues. But she would pump frequencies, scalar and other ones, but she would pump different frequencies 12 to 24 hours a day, all through the house. And eventually, as I was living there, because she was helping with my health, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, this many different frequencies being pumped through this at 12 to 24 hour intervals constantly cannot be a good thing. And I'm not talking about doing it one-on-one with people and having sessions. I'm talking about doing it 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this can't be good for people.
Well, I do 24 hours a day. I actually have 6 scalar devices. For anybody who's familiar with scalar devices, I have 34. I have 43 coils running in my house pretty much at any given time, which is a lot. And then whenever I don't have a client in my device, like right now my devices are right in front of me, I'm in it. The only time I take myself out is when I put a client into the Skio, the biofeedback. However, I will say this isn't for the faint of heart. You do want to collapse the fields every once in a while. Once a month, I turn all of them off for a day and then turn them back on, because the fields can create almost like a web where things can kind of get caught in them. So every once in a while, it's good just to collapse them and just to start fresh. But I wouldn't say it's for the faint of heart, because it's kind of like this much energy therapy is a lot like angel magic. If anyone's dabbled in angel magic, they know what I'm talking about. It is going to remove everything from your life that is not aligned with you. Why? Because it's holding a container. So this device actually that's on my lap right now is playing the vibration of divine love. And that's usually what I leave it on 24/7. And so it means anything in my life that is not aligned with the vibration of divine love cycles out very, very quickly. Sometimes this looks like my life burning to the ground so, and then being rebirthed. But every rebirth I've gone through, I've been even happier, even more connected to the things that have come to me. But it's definitely been a big process. My life has looked like death, rebirth, death, rebirth, death, rebirth. And not everybody wants that experience. So I'd say 100% it's okay to be like, I don't want that. I do. It's a personal choice. I want.
Me just suffice to say is that she was insane. She would be like constantly thinking her husband was possessed, and I was like, oh my God. I didn't know that my former teacher had kicked her out. My former teacher kicked somebody out. That's pretty extreme. But yeah, what I just noticed was I was like constantly, like she's constantly saying someone's possessed, 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 possessed. Well, let me check this. I'm like, dude ain't possessed, man. She'd be running around the house saying that her husband was Satan and Lucifer. It was like the funniest thing I ever saw. But I'm watching this and I'm just like, so I'm not going against scale or any of that kind of stuff. Because like she's just pumping all these different ones. That's what I was getting. I was like this is like, but she's also pouring salt on plants because she thought they were possessed too.
Well, I would say as it relates to like stuff like that, once again, scalar energy is the way I refer to it, any energy devices people have in their house. I don't know a lot about anyone's other than scalar, but I'm sure many of them similarly, is how I would refer to it is their bookmarks. But you get to choose whether or not you participate in their energy. But like the way I describe it, so like having the vibration of divine love, it's like a constant unconscious bookmark that's reminding me of the vibration I want to be aligned in. But it's up to me to either surrender into that energy or I can fight it and resist it. And it's when people have a bunch of scalar energy in their house and they're fighting and resisting it rather than surrendering into the bookmark that I find sometimes people can go through what I would call more growing pains than when you're just surrendering. Now, like, it really depends. If you've got a couple coils, then it's probably not going to like be that hard. But if what you're describing is she had like a ton of coils that were running 24/7 and she wasn't surrendering into the vibration that they were producing, then she's probably would see a lot of resistance coming up in her reality because that's what it's there to do. It's there to bring up the resistance so you can let it go. But if you don't let it go, then there's just going to be resistance, which isn't very fun.
Yeah, she had severe mental issues. Severe.
So, sounds like, I mean, I've heard that Moldavite can do the sort of cause destruction, shall we say, to promote a rebirth. So it sounds like a bit like that, because I mean, some people prefer crystals, but I don't really know much about scalar waves, I must admit, but I've heard about them, and they sound like they do great things. But do you think that you'll ever come to I don't know, do you think you'll ever come to a point where you feel like you don't need the waves anymore because you can almost generate, or you're in that state of sort of love, divine love, or whatever, you constantly, so therefore you don't need the bookmark to remind you of it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I'm actually already there where I don't feel like I need any of the tools I have. But the way I kind of see it is like I'm still a being that enjoys connection and support. And I don't want to have to do everything on my own. I know I can do everything on my own, but I don't want to. And so I want devices, I want people, I want experiences and environments in my life that amplify that feeling of love, because in this beautiful experience of being human, we get access to every energy. We have access to the full spectrum here. And so yes, I can do it all on my own, but I want to have friends in my life that remind me of the love in my heart. I want to have connections. I want to have devices that support me. And I want, really, for me, I want my life to be easier and effortless and supported. And so for me, I don't think I'll ever get rid of these technologies. Just like I think I'll always have a spiritual teacher that I can turn to, somebody that, I can lean on. I'll always have good friendships in my life, and I'll always have technology in my life, because Like, why not have more love? Where I don't think as human beings we meant to, or even most of us want to do everything alone. I think we thrive off of connection. And I think the more we can find tools, resources, and people who help us feel more aligned with ourselves, then run with that for as long as it feels good for you.
Yeah, beautiful. I agree. I think we do need connection. We can see that if we go a certain amount of time without seeing anyone or connecting with everyone, like when the whole world was, or whatever, was in lockdown, people really missed that, seeing each other and connecting and hugs and everything like that. But so yeah, I totally agree. Thomas, you got any more questions for Hayley?
I'm good.
Hayley, do you want to just we're going to wrap it up. Do you want to just remind us where we can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at the website that's listed in the banner there. So you could put www. in front of it if you'd like, but it's just healthrough.love. There's no .com or .ca after that. So you can reach out to me there, or you can find me probably on Facebook. But otherwise, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Brother, have you got anything coming up this weekend?
Yeah, I have a class Sunday. I just haven't named it yet.
Okay, the usual class. Okay, to be confirmed. Subject.
Yep.
Right, brilliant. Thank you again, Hayley. It's been wonderful having you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, brother, as always. And we'll see you everyone next week. Thank you for watching. Take care, everyone.
Peace.
Au revoir.